I want to show you QuickBooks. Here it is. All right. So the good thing about this, I'm going to show you a sample company file, and you can actually find the same file yourself online if you wanted to go in and play around with things a bit. We're actually purchasing a software like this. And so you should be able to see the company file, Craig's Design and Landscaping Services on the screen. So this is going to be the dashboard in QuickBooks Online. So you can see exactly what, how it's set up in real time. So if I open my actual company file that I have right now, it's going to look just like this. So you're seeing the ins and outs without having to purchase the software right now. But in the first step, it's actually going to show you your bank accounts that are connected. And then there's a few different setup steps that'll help you actually get the accounting software set up for you in the beginning. And we're going to skip over that for today, though. I wanted to show you the business overview section.
Can I say one thing really quickly?
Yeah, sure.
The good thing about hiring an accountant is that if your books are not in order previously, they will do all of the adding of your bank accounts, get everything sorted for you, and then help you learn how to go from there. So in the beginning, before I did my financial statements, I had a hard time starting because I was like, wait, I'm gonna have to do all of that by myself. How am I gonna be able to put everything in the system? And it's really awesome that when you have that support, you don't start it from scratch. Someone's taking care of it for you and then guiding you through. So that's also a great benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really I would say the initial setup piece is the most important, because if you get your accounting software set up the way that it makes sense to you and it's easy to use, going forward, there won't be any issues. So that's a really good point, Navasi. So here on the dashboard, this is where you can just see a glimpse of everything that's going on in the software. So we can see the invoices, how much is overdue, how many invoices, the amount that you had that's not quite due yet. You could even see what's been deposited into your bank account and what hasn't been deposited. We have a expense snapshot on the dashboard where you can see exactly where your expenses are going. So for Craig's Design and Landscaping Company, it looks like he spent about $755 on maintenance. And the cool thing about this is within the last 30 days, but if I wanted to see how much I've spent, let's say this quarter, you can change the reporting period and the charts will update for you there as well. And then there's also a snapshot of your profit and loss. So this is going to be your revenue minus your expenses. And you can actually see the breakout of your income and expenses here. And then again, just the bank accounts and how it's and the balances that you have here. I'm going to walk through all of these tabs briefly just to kind of give you a layout of what the system looks like. And then I'll touch on some of the points that I've mentioned in the slides before. This is your banking section. So you remember when we talked about the automation and the real-time data? In QuickBooks, you actually have the option to go in here and connect your bank account to QuickBooks Online. So anytime, if you're like me, I'm always checking my online banking. Anytime something hits your online banking platform, it's going to feed over to your accounting software as well. This says it's been updated moments ago, but let's say if I first came in here and it said it had been updated 5 hours ago, there's a feature in here that I could simply just click update and it would refresh these values and bring in any new transactions. This is really what I see a lot of people who use QuickBooks, why they like it so much, because you can actually go in here and record transactions straight from your bank feed. And I don't think there's a limit on the amount of bank and credit card accounts you can add to this screen. I actually have one client right now who has about 15 bank and credit card transactions all mapped in different tabs on this one screen. Another good thing is we talked a little bit about automation and making your bookkeeping a lot quicker for you each month. Let's say we have a recurring expense. Let's say this PG&E expense is monthly, and it should always go to your utilities expense. You can actually go in here and set rules so that when a transaction hits with this bank description, PG&E, that it records it as utilities each time. And you can actually have it actually automatically add these transactions after the system has picked up that a rule should be applied to this. So again, a lot of ways to save on time spent towards your bookkeeping. And I can't move on until I share this feature as well, which is receipts. So if you're one that, I know I have a lot of people come to me with shoe boxes filled with receipts. If you're someone who always wants to, keep up with your receipts, QuickBooks actually has a feature where you can take a picture on your phone within their app of your receipt, and you can actually upload it to this system from your cell phone and from the app. And actually, when the receipts enter the system, they would be listed down here. You would see a picture of the receipt, which would get attached to the expense that you create, and you would be able to match that transaction to the bank feed. This company file doesn't have a real life example, but that feature is very powerful. So I wanted to tell you all about that.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
So under the receipts, I saw on the right side that there was a forward from email. What I've been doing this whole time is any purchases I've made, I would throw them in the receipt folder 2021, and I have a 2020 also. And so so if I were to just dive into this, I don't know if Wave has this because that's what I'm using, but I'm sure I'll eventually get to QuickBooks. So when you click on that, or when you set that up, what do you do with the existing emails? Do they automatically look through it, or do you just have to kind of send it to QuickBooks manually?
Yeah, so the forward from email, you would set your email up, a specific email address here, and it's an actual email address that you create, a custom email. So anytime you may receive an email receipt, you could forward it to this email address, which would then upload the receipt here. But if you're saying that you have receipts in a folder that's saved on your desktop, then you could actually just upload them from your computer here, from those files.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Or if it's in Google Drive folder, same thing there. You can upload that way too. Any other questions on this piece? All right. So the next tab is expenses. So QuickBooks does a good job of making it user-friendly so that you know exactly where to go for what you're looking for. So under expenses, you have either expenses, where it shows all of your expense transactions, or you have a tab for vendors. So if you wanted to see the vendors that you have set up in QuickBooks and actually look at the expenses per vendor, you could do that as well. So let's just look at Bob's Burger Joint for a second here. So we can actually see that Bob's Burger Joint, we've spent some money for meals, and we can see all of the individual transactions that have been listed for Bob's Burger Joint. If we, let's say today, for today's workshop, let's say we ate at Bob's Burger Joint, and I need to make sure that the expense is recorded in the accounting software. All I would do is go up here to New Transaction. I'm entering an expense, so I'm going to select expense. And then I can enter the details into the expense. So we are going to pay Bob's Burger Joint, and let's say it came out of the checking account because we used our debit card. For today's date, and I ask you a payment method, we can just say the Visa, and we can categorize it here. So say we bought meals. We actually bought lunch for Focus on Finances workshop. You can be as detailed as we'd like in the description bucket and say we spent $200 on our workshop meal. That's all you would need to do to record this expense. And then you would save and close it. And since this is a dummy file, it's not really going to do anything, but that's all you would do to create an expense transaction in QuickBooks. Once you did do that, you would come back out and we see the Bob's Burger joint expense for 4.3, meals and entertainment for $200. So that's one example of how you would record an expense in here. You could also, if you're going to write a check, you can go to new transaction and select check and pretty much record the transaction the same way that we just did. But here we have an option to either enter a check number, or, and that's if you're writing a check out of your checkbook, or if you have actual checks that are compatible with QuickBooks Online software, we can actually print checks from QuickBooks as well. And so, I'll show you an example. So let's say meals and entertainment again. I'm going to leave the description off just for time purposes. Down here at the bottom, there's a place that says print check. If we click on that, it'll bring us up to this screen. And of course, we don't have any checks right now, but that's where you'll be able to choose the type of voucher that you have. And from there, you would walk through the steps and you would be able to physically print a check from your accounting software. And this is what's in the expenses section. Any questions in this area? All right. All right, next we'll just look at sales. So sales, there's quite a few things that you can do in the sales tab. And I'm walking you through these individual pieces because at the end, I'm going to tie it all into the reports, the financial statements that we're going to produce. But here you'd be able to view all of your customer invoices if you wanted to create an invoice. Was there a question? Okay. You would be able to create invoices from this template, from this tab as well. If you have any invoices that are overdue, you would be able to see all of the transactions here so that you know to come in here, and maybe you need to send your client a reminder saying, hey, your invoice isn't due. You could do this in QuickBooks Online. It will prepare an email for you. You can just take a look at it and say, hey, I'm sending you a reminder to let you know this invoice hasn't been paid. You can do all of this from the system. It'll also tell you, what's coming up to be due, what's been paid, and then what actually has been deposited into your bank account. So all of the information it's really nice to have all of the information in one place, which is why I really like QuickBooks Online. If you have a business that holds inventory, you can also enter your inventory items and things to track in their products and services field. If it's taxable, then you could check it as taxable. And what this does is it helps the software actually calculate your sales tax for you. And you can actually, depending on what state you're in, you may actually even be able to pay your sales tax from QuickBooks Online. So QuickBooks Online is just really a one-stop shop for everything. If you have employees, there is options to process payroll in QuickBooks Online. They have different subscriptions for payroll, depending upon what you really need. They have a payroll service where the system calculates things for you, but you're responsible for taking care of the taxes. And then a step up, they have a software or a subscription that actually does everything for you, from sending out the direct deposits or checks to actually paying the tax authorities on your behalf as well. Also, I know a big one is if you don't have any employees, but you do have contractors, you can actually add them in QuickBooks as a contractor and mark them as a 1099 contractor. So at the end of the year, when it's time to send out those 1099 forms, you could do so within QuickBooks Online. Any questions before I dive into reports? I know this piece is what you all have been waiting on. All right, so this is one of my favorite places for not only my business, but my clients' businesses as well. I spend a lot of time in the reports section of QuickBooks so that I can really analyze how the business is doing and be able to provide, different recommendations and suggestions on how to do things differently to improve the business. So always QuickBooks starts with the favorites, which is where you'll see your balance sheet and your profit and loss, two of those statements that we talked about earlier. And then your accounts receivable, your aging summary is also start here because a lot of people, business owners, want to know, what invoices have not been paid. So typically when you get the accounting software, these three would be starred as your favorites, but you have so many other reports to choose from. And what QuickBooks tries to do is give you a heading so you'll know exactly what reports are where. So for instance, who owes you? This is going to be things dealing with your customers. So your AR aging details, your accounts receivable aging summary, your customer balance summary, invoice list. So anything dealing with who owes you money is going to be in this section. That's where you're going to find these reports. Sales and customers, again, all of these reports listed below deal with sales and customers. So very intuitive. What you owe. So this is going to be your accounts payable information and reports of that sort. Expenses and vendors, sales tax, if you need reports on your employees. And then for your accountant, if your accountant is requesting different types of reports from you, this section is going to be where you're going to want to start to go look to see if that report exists and which one you should select to send to your accountant. We're just going to go back up to favorites. We're going to take a look at the income statement or the profit and loss, since that was one of the first types of financial statements that we looked at during the slides. So here you can actually see a P&L or a profit and loss statement for Craig's Design and Landscaping. So right now the report is showing January 1 to April 3rd. But if I wanted to change this reporting period to say, to look at February transactions, then we could actually update the reporting period here, or we could change the dates here that we want to look at. Let's just look at how Craig did in February. So you'll see that the report's been updated for the date that you want to look at. And then we can see how the financial statement is actually laid out. So remember, your income statement is where you're going to find your income and your expenses. And so typically one thing that I see for new clients of mine that come on board and really don't understand how their business is performing is they may have something that says sales. And there's just one line item here that says sales, but they may have multiple revenue streams. So my first suggestion to them would be, list out your different revenue streams here so you can actually see how much money you're making in each area. So if Craig wanted to come in here and see how he's performing revenue stream wise, he would be able to see that, his design income was $975, whereas his landscaping service earned $2,700. So you can easily see how much money you're making per revenue stream. QuickBooks does a good job of being able to provide the account level, not only the account level, but also sub accounts to really make sure you have the information that you need to see what you need to see. And I can talk financial statements all day. So if I start moving a little fast, you guys feel free to tell me to slow it down or just jump in with questions anytime.
Jasmine, I have a question.
Sure.
So, to what nth degree do you keep track of stuff? Because, my husband and I have separate checking accounts because he will spend 10 days on finding the penny. And at the end of the year, I'm like, oh, I have an extra $200. And he's like, wow, what? So, to what degree do I keep track? Everything
From the business standpoint, I think that was Jackie, everything. So the first thing you want to make sure that you do is never commingle personal and business expenses together. So when you connect that bank account to QuickBooks Online, that needs to be a business bank account with all business information in there, or business transactions in there. And yes, every single transaction needs to be recorded, because what's going to happen is if you don't record every single penny, when you go in here to do your bank reconciliations aren't going to match. They're not going to reconcile. And typically the main key to making sure that all of your business transactions have been recorded for the year or for the month is to perform those bank reconciliations. So yes, every penny.
Did my husband call you? My husband called you.
Sure. Yes, and my clients, sometimes I'm like, they'll have maybe a charge of $1.27. $1.27. And if I can't easily tell the vendor name and what that expense for, I will go back and ask them for what the $1.27 transaction is for. Yes, every penny. Every penny.
I loves you, Jasmine.
Any other questions? No, I like questions, so keep them coming. All right, so we can hop down to the expense section. And here, depending on what type of business you have, some businesses have cost of goods sold. So they have a cost for selling the items that they sell. And then you have just normal regular expenses. QuickBooks does a good job that if you do have cost of goods sold accounts that you need to see split out before your gross profit, you can add those types of accounts in here and split them out from just regular normal operating expenses, like, you know, your automobile or your legal and professional fees. But here's where you're going to see on the profit and loss or the income statement. Remember, they're interchangeable. This is where you're going to see all of those expenses listed as well. One thing that I find helpful or useful in QuickBooks is if you want to group things by category. So let's say you have your gas and electric here as well as your telephone. You can create, you know, a roll-up. I call it a roll-up account for utilities. So even on a day where you didn't really need to see this detailed information and you just wanted to know what was spent on utilities, you can, you know, collapse it and you can see that $188 was spent on utilities. But if you did need to see the additional details, you also have the options to do that as well. So I typically, I think just because of how my mind works, I like to be as detailed as possible. Just because when you start doing the analysis of how your business is performing, you may need to see it at that detailed level. Before I go off of this financial statement, I also wanted to show you, if you wanted to see like month over month how you're performing, or at the end of the year, if you want to see what your profit and loss statement looks like for the entire year, you can actually change this custom date here. And let's just say let's say this year. And again, we're only through first quarter, but let's just say this year. And then we're going to look at it by month. So I'm going to display columns by months, just so that I can see each month how I'm performing. Once I do that, and I think this is just going to distract you a little, so I'm going to end this on 3/31. Once you do that, you can actually see the months breakout for each. And so for design income, there were no sales for design income in January. And then you see it picked up in February and then even increased in March. So you have the capability from this reporting feature to actually analyze at whatever level you need to analyze to be able to make those business decisions. This is something that I love to use. And actually, if you go with a subscription in QuickBooks, like QuickBooks Plus, they have a feature in there where you can actually enter your budget numbers. And then when you run a report like your profit and loss, you can actually compare your actual numbers to what you budgeted and see the difference. And then start to dive into really why you either weren't able to meet your budget or if you exceeded it. So that's also something that QuickBooks offers. And So we talked about not really knowing or understanding the accounting practices. And this is where the software is really powerful. So there's two methods there's two accounting methods that you can choose or use. There's either the cash basis of accounting or the accrual basis of accounting. Typically, most small businesses, they use the cash basis of accounting, unless maybe you're a small business that keeps track of inventory. But QuickBooks Online actually allows you to select which accounting method you use, and it will make the adjustments to your reports depending on which one you use. So cash basis is going to be a business that records their income and sales as money comes in and money goes out. So actually receiving the cash or paying cash, that's going to be cash basis. Accrual is going to be more so you're actually accounting for everything per se under the accrual balance. So let's say you receive a Duke Energy bill. At that point, you would record your Duke Energy bill in the software as an expense under the accrual method. Whereas for the cash basis, you're not going to really enter that Duke Energy expense until you've actually paid it. So there's different methods to accounting. And even if you don't understand exactly the difference between the two, if you know which accounting method your business uses, you can go in here and select it and run the report, and the accounting software will actually make the changes for you. So I'm going to do a 1 month view on this one. Let's look at last month, just so you can see how the numbers change. And I'm going to change this to totals only. So under the cash method of accounting, we can see that design income was $637.50. That means that Craig actually received cash for his design income services of $637.50. If we change this to accrual, what it's going to do is it's going to take into consideration any invoices that Craig sent his customers that they may not have paid yet. And so that's really the difference between cash and accrual. Even if you didn't really understand the difference, if you knew which accounting method you followed, you would be able to select it here, and QuickBooks would make the changes to the reports based on what you select. I hope I haven't confused anyone, but very powerful feature, because I know when you go as a business owner, when you go to get your business taxes prepared, the accounting method matters. So your CPA may ask you, how did you run your reports? Did you run the reports using the cash method or the accrual method? And you'd be able to, tell them that. And even when they went here to look at it, it'll tell you which basis, cash or accrual basis, your reports are formatted in. A lot of times when you start to think about those different stakeholders that we talked about, they're going to want to see your financial statements in the accrual basis, just so they can really get a big picture of what your business is doing. So they want to consider those invoices that have been sent out for services that you actually did provide that just maybe haven't been paid yet.